So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the latest in our series of FIPP Insider webinars. The FIPP Global Digital Subscription Snapshot is published quarterly in partnership with our friends at CeleraOne, and it's become the definitive survey of the latest data and information from the digital subscriptions marketplace. And as well as the 100 or so publishing brands that we feature, recent updates have seen us add data for VOD and music streaming services. So we're delighted today to be able to present the latest updates to this data, following on from the webinar we did earlier this year to present the Q1 results, which many of you will have attended. In the first part of today's session, I'll be bringing you the latest figures from the key players in the market, as well as providing you with an analysis of the types of paywall out there and some hints and tips on how to introduce one. We'll then be hearing from our guests. We have representatives with us from CeleraOne and from Tagesspiegel. They'll be giving us their real-world experiences of digital subscriptions in a crisis and a few hints and tips about how to proceed. To make the most out of today's session, I would recommend that you download a copy of the report. I'm only going to be presenting the highlights. If you haven't already done that, it's free to do so, and a link should be appearing in the chat box now or in the next couple of minutes. Before I introduce our guests, though, let me run through a few quick housekeeping items. Today's session is partly a presentation and partly a Q&A with our guests, and we're very keen to hear from as many of you as possible. So if you look in your webinar controls at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A button. You can go in there and submit your questions, and you can also upvote other delegates' questions and make comments on them. There's also a chat box in the same place in your webinar controls at the bottom there. You can use this to chat either privately with myself and with the speakers or with the other attendees. We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the event, and I do recommend that you keep it open because the FIPP team will be posting comments and useful links throughout the event. Now, today's session is produced in collaboration with our key corporate partners, CeleraOne. They are the #1 paywall and single sign-on solution for publishers. You'll be hearing more about their contribution to the success of their clients, many of whom are featured in this report, later in this webinar. We'd like to thank them and our other partners for their support. We would not be able to produce this valuable insight without them. I'd also like to thank FIPP's members for the support you give to the organization. Following the Congress, we'll be putting most of our content behind a members-only wall on our website. So for those of you that are not members, if you want to continue making use of the knowledge and insight that we provide, we would encourage you to join. Membership starts from as little as £50 a month. You can contact me on james@fipp.com for more details of how to do that. Now, if you find today's sessions useful, the presentation of the next edition of the report will be part of the forthcoming FIPP Congress, which is taking place online for the first time. We have 80 sessions across the whole month of September with leading industry speakers covering a variety of topics, including, of course, digital subscriptions and paywalls. The Congress will also feature the ability to meet with other delegates on a one-to-one basis through the event platform and a virtual exhibition so that you can meet potential new partners. If you go to fippcongress.com, you can get more details and look at the agenda, and the early bird price ends today. So don't delay. This is your last chance to save money on a ticket to the Congress. They start from €300. Tomorrow you'll get a post-event email with a link to the slides, a link to download the report, and of course some more details on the Congress. I would also encourage you to sign up for our forthcoming free 3-part digital subscription training course. This takes place across the next 3 months. Sign-up details will be in the post-event email too. Right, I think that's enough from me. So before I begin the first part of today's session, it's time to introduce today's guests. I'm delighted to be joined first by Walterscheid. He is the co-MD of CeleraOne and has a long history of management positions in consultancy and digital businesses. And my second guest today is Caspar Seibert, currently the head of digital marketing at Tagesspiegel. He has more than 10 years experience in publishing, product management and technology. And at Welt.de, a brand of Axel Springer, he launched the first paywall of a major news site in Germany in 2012. He later joined CeleraOne and was one of the fathers of this digital subscription Snapshot. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to them both, and we'll hear from them both in just a moment. So we're going to crack on with a presentation of the results. So I'm going to share my screen and show you the presentation that we have here. Let's just do that, and hopefully you can all now see that. So this is the report produced quarterly by FIPP with, as we said before, the support of CeleraOne. I will just unpin myself so that everybody else can see. There we go. It's available to download from our website. The link is also in the chat box, as I said earlier. And what I'm going to do today is to talk you through some very brief extracts of the latest data. This is the August 2020 update, so it's only an update of the data. A full update will be published next month, and the session to discuss those findings will be part of the FIPP Congress. And there's obviously more details, as we said earlier, on the Congress in the chat, including how to book. So I just want to start with a little bit of information on the methodology. We take data from whatever publicly available source we can find. There isn't a single consistent source for digital subscription data. It's not covered by most ABCs, for example. There is no consistent standard for how numbers are reported in this area. For example, subscriptions on free trials, subscribers joining and leaving within the same period, and how to treat digital and print subscriber bundles. I will say that if you go to the German ABC, the IVW site, you can get a lot more detail on the brands that are covered there, principally the two Axel Springer brands, where they do break out that level of data. But for most of them, that is not the case. There's also no link at the moment to readership. So we don't know how many of these subscriptions are active or passive, how much of them are being used, whether there's just a few heavy users or whether there's a broad base of readership. And maybe that's something our guests can tell us about later on. And then before we get into the data, some common complaints. We rely partly on submissions by publishers to keep this report updated. So if you're not in the report, and you should be, or if your numbers are wrong, please do come and tell us. We love to hear from you. We've heard from many brands over the years in compiling this report who've had one of these complaints, and usually it means that they end up providing us with better data. So do come and tell us if you want to be included or if the numbers are not quite correct. So this is a brief extract here from our how-to report on paywalls from last year, which is going to be reissued shortly. This is a reminder that there are multiple types of paywall. You should be able to download this report, by the way, from the website. And again, we'll put a link in the chat later on. This report captures all of the different types of paywall that there are. So you can see on here a hard paywall, such as the FT has, where you have to subscribe in order to view anything. A metered paywall, such as the New York Times or the Economist, where you have a certain amount of free articles before you have to pay. A freemium paywall, such as Bild has. There are a large number of free articles, but some premium items behind the paywall. A hybrid model, like Aftenposten, which has a meter, but some valuable content is subscription only, as it says here. A dynamic one, like NZZ or the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, where the technology is adapting to your use of the site and giving you offers based on your usage. The membership model, the donation model, such as The Guardian has, where you're prompted to give us a donation, and the premium model like Telegraph, Netflix, or Spotify. Increasingly, we see that the best practice is the dynamic paywall, which changes the experience based on user behavior, and we'll find out a little bit more about that later on. So let's start by looking at the top 10 by volume. So this is the data taken from the latest report. I'm going to just keep my chat open so that I can see what's going on. There's just some links. Okay, so all of those links are now in there if you want to go in and download stuff. So this is the top 10 from the latest report. And you can see that the New York Times remains on top. They are the leader in this space. They have been the leader since we started, and this quarter is no exception. They've now broken through the 5 million subscriber barrier for the first time. The next set of results are due in a couple of weeks. If I had to make a guess, I would suggest that they're going to break through the 5.5 million barrier next time, possibly even more based on some of the numbers we're going to see later on. A 10% growth in the quarter would not be unusual. The total value, the digital subscriptions revenue that they're making was approaching $500 million in the last 12 months, so an enormous amount of money. And we know that the yield is around $1.85 per week per subscriber. So that's about $8 per month. So they are the gold standard. They're the one that we're all aspiring for. Some way behind them is the Dow Jones Group. It has a lower subscriber number, but it's primarily a B2B service, so the revenues generated are much higher. The pricing reflects that. And after that is another one in that same stable, the Wall Street Journal, the individual Wall Street Journal title, primarily a business-focused audience, hence the higher price, and we'll look at their performance against the New York Times later on. Then we have the Informer, which you may not be familiar with, but the Informer is an online paid digital magazine for the GameStop retail chain in the US. One of the running commentaries on this report over the last few years has been the frustration we have at the relatively few magazine brands that are in there. I think in the main list, there's only The Economist, The Wired, and a couple of others. So it's a little bit surprising that the biggest magazine brand in here is one that comes from a retailer, is not one that comes from a traditional magazine company. We don't have any confirmed numbers from the Washington Post. They're not being very open about what their numbers are at the moment. The next title on our list, we do estimate that they have at least 2 million subscribers at the moment. That's based on some comments that have been given by some of their senior executives recently. That puts them into 5th place on the list. And then behind them is the FT, continuing to perform strongly. Another business-focused title with a premium price, as is Nikkei, which you can see further down the list there. And then in the bottom half of the top 10, we've got 4 large newspaper groups. In the US, Gannett has over 850,000 subscribers now. They have had some considerable growth during the coronavirus. The Schibsted Group is an example of the success we're seeing with digital subscriptions in Scandinavia. All of the major companies there, Schibsted, Aller, Bonnier, and Amedia, have large volumes of digital subscriptions. In fact, in Norway, we estimate that something like 25% of the adult population is subscribing to a digital news product. Finally, there are the News Corp titles in Australia who've broken through the 600,000 barrier, and the Axel Springer titles, Bild and Die Welt, who are equal with News Corp on 613,000. We'll see a little bit more on these bottom 4 later on. There's been some pretty significant upward movement in the last quarter for each of these. So let's now look at the titles that are reporting in this quarter. So these are all of the brands that have got new numbers in this edition of the report. And this is significant because this is the first time we've managed to get some evidence of the impact of the coronavirus crisis on digital subscriptions and on the volumes that we're seeing. So just to talk you through this table, you can see here the title, you can see their latest number. This is the one that appears in the Q2 report. You can see the previous figure that we had for them, when that last reported figure was, what the growth was quarter on quarter, or actually period on period, I should say, the growth from the last report. And then for those titles where the previous report was many periods ago, we've tried to average that out into a compound quarterly growth number, which is the final number that you see there. So let's talk about these in a little bit more detail. We've talked about the Post, we've talked about Nikkei, so I won't talk about those in any more detail. But the first one to look at really is Gannett. So Gannett, which owns USA Today and a host of regional papers in America, and they are reporting a massive 42% increase in digital subscriptions since their last numbers, which were at the end of 2019. So if you like, that's a 42% growth in the 6 months since the end of last year. And that might be the first concrete sign that we've seen for a big publisher of a COVID bounce, which is, I think, the phrase we can use for that. And if you look down the list, you can see the Telegraph in the UK, one of the major national newspapers in the UK, a 17% quarterly increase. That's a single quarter increase of 17%. The Boston Globe reporting a 37% increase since the end of 2019. Welt Plus reporting a 10% quarterly increase, quarter-on-quarter growth. And most amazingly, El Diario of Spain, coming from a very low base, but reporting a 50% increase in digital subscribers in a single quarter. Now, crucially, all of these growth rates are significantly in excess of what we had been seeing as the long-term trend prior to the crisis. To give you an idea, growth rates for most brands that were mature in this space were starting to average out at between 2% and 5% per quarter prior to this. For the brands that are on this list where we can compare a Q2 figure with a Q1 figure directly, so in other words, the ones that are showing a quarter-on-quarter increase in our numbers, and that's Nikkei, Bild Plus, Tribune, Telegraph, Welt Plus, Minneapolis Star Tribune, and El Diario, then with the exception of one of them, they are all reporting growth of 10% or more in a single quarter. So that might be double what they were seeing prior to the coronavirus. Nevertheless, I still think that's a little bit disappointing. That's perhaps not as much as we had anticipated. And if you look at FIPP's regularly published report on the impact of the coronavirus on the industry, we had seen reports of traffic to sites increasing by 100% or more. So it looks like the growth rate for paywalls is significantly smaller than this. And of course, that might also be affected by the fact that most news organizations have put their coronavirus content in front of the paywall. Very briefly, this is a comparison of the New York Times against the Wall Street Journal. We don't have new data for either of these, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, not least because we also want to get to our guests, but you can look at the details of the growth profile of the two brands here, and perhaps an early sign that there was in the last quarter of results for the New York Times with that growth from Q4 of 2019 to Q1 of 2020. That was already very strong. It was already the strongest growth rate that they'd seen for a number of years. And if you compare that with the numbers I've just shown you on the previous slide, you can see why I think we will have a number in excess of 5.5 million. In other words, another 10% growth in the quarter for them in the next quarter. So we also wanted to see, and we continue to update this, whether there is any correlation between weekly price and volume. So this scatter chart plots the data for the top 30, again with the New York Times showing the yield from their accounts. And we can see that there isn't really much of a correlation yet. So in other words, even if you exclude the outliers, there isn't yet a suggestion that a lower price or a higher price affects your volume. The B2B focused products like Nikkei and the FT, which we've labeled there, are able to charge a premium price and deliver a higher volume. But for Western brands, excluding Nikkei and the FT, the average pricing is about $3.10 per week, and it doesn't seem to have an enormous amount of effect on their volumes. So I just wanted to finish this first section by putting the news and publishing market into context. And really, this is just a realization that even the largest player, the New York Times, is tiny in comparison with the big VOD and music streaming services where volumes can reach into the many tens of millions. You can see on the left-hand side of the chart there, the largest VOD player is Netflix with almost 200 million subscribers. The largest music streaming business is Spotify with nearly 150 million, I think it was 138 million paying subscribers in their results announced last week. And there are also a host of players across Asia with very large subscriber numbers in both VOD and music. So the largest players in both VOD and music streaming are much higher than the largest news brand, the New York Times. And also it's interesting to highlight the lack of large entertainment or special interest brands in our list. There's no Vogue, there's no Elle, there's no Men's Health in there, and that feels like a big gap. So just to close then, here are our 6 steps on implementing a paywall, again taken from our how-to report, which you can download. You're going to hear more on this from our guests in a minute, so I won't steal their thunder, but very briefly, and this is your takeaway that you'll be able to take in the slides when we send them to you after the event. Value proposition is key. So you've got to make sure that you've got unique, high quality content that people are prepared to pay for. You've got to be driven by the data in how you manage your customers. You've got to crucially get the right technology. It's no coincidence that CeleraOne are our partners in this respect. They are one of the high quality providers of paywall and digital subscription technology, and absolutely getting the right tech for your business is crucial to the success of that. You've also got to get everyone in the business working towards the same goal. You've got to make the user experience second to none. Why does Amazon do so well? Because it's so easy to buy from them. It's got to be easy to buy from you. And you've got to figure out how to bring this large legacy audience that you have in print, if you have one, to how to bring it with you. So there are some crucial factors there that we can perhaps explore with Caspar later on and see if they map to his experience. So thank you very much for watching that first part. Here's some actions that you can do. I'll put those back up on screen later, but the main thing is to download those reports in the chat and to also then go to the FIPP Congress website, and you can follow me on Twitter and various other things. So that's enough from me. Let's go now to our guests. Caspar, York, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start with you, York. Give us your immediate reaction to the latest data that we've seen in that edition of the report.
Have to say very, very happy about that. Very happy to see that our industry in digital is growing that good. Great growth figures across the globe. You can see New York Times clearly outstanding, which is just wow. Very, very interesting. Very, very cool. The last months have clearly, you can see that if it has a, what was the word you used there? It has a COVID-19 bounce. Clearly, you can see that we have clearly seen an acceleration in digitization. Yeah, and of course, we from CeleraOne are very happy to support one of the top 10 players with their digital initiative, with their paid content strategy, and that's Axel Springer. So it's great. Yeah, great figures.
Some really good numbers from Axel Springer as well. I'm sure they must be very pleased on that. You guys obviously have a very good view across the industry because you're operating with the multiple players. Do some of the large increases that we've seen in the report match your experience, match what you've seen in the quarter across your client base?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say that nearly all of our clients have reported similar growth figures, quite large growth figures, double digit or high one-digit ones. But everybody could see, probably not everyone could turn them and convert them into paying subscribers, but everybody could experience on their websites a massive growth in visitors. Yeah? And of course, some of them could then turn them into paying and hopefully long-term loyal customers. But yes, we could absolutely see similar figures.
And I guess this has also prompted a lot of news providers in particular to reevaluate their strategies, to realize that paid content is the way to go. Are you seeing a flood of new publishers coming to you at this time?
Yes, I would say the demand is great. The opportunities we could get in have increased. That's great news for us, absolutely. Many of the clients I talked to have accelerated their initiatives in digitization or brought forward something were planned for next year's, and now they have brought it forward to do the digitization in this area of paid content already in this year. So yes, we have good talks and could see quite some opportunities coming in. Yeah, happy.
And you did this very effectively in our last webinar. Maybe you can do it again. You can help us to bust the myth about how hard it is to get started with this, because I can imagine there's a lot of publishers out there, particularly smaller ones, who are thinking, oh, well, this is for the big boys. It's too difficult for me to do it. How easy is it to get started, and how quickly can somebody get started with this?
It is. I think it's always the question: what is the idea? What do you want? So if it's just a simple, very hard, not very intelligent paywall, it's quite easy. There are plugins out there. if you want to go a little bit deeper into your architecture, if you want to connect your existing systems, if the paid strategy should be a part of your infrastructure and ecosystem, then it's always a little project. Yeah? So I think it's important to understand that we from CeleraOne are not selling just a simple plugin. We sell audience development software combined with paywalls and checkout and single sign-on, and this of course has somehow be implemented in your architecture, together connected with your EIP system, with your CRM systems, eventually with your BI system. So it depends a little bit on what you are looking for. It can be very simple, and of course we can also start very simple and start in waves. But if you really want to have a powerful, intelligent software, there are always a couple of things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a project for the faint-hearted, but it's not terribly difficult in the long term either. We have a good question before we come to you, Caspar. We have a good question here that maybe you can answer this as well, from Abhishek Dadu. Thank you very much for your question. He says it would be good to know what percentage of new subscribers have gone to the top 5 publishers. The winner takes all seems to be the trend, just like in e-commerce. I mean, maybe a view from both of you on that. What do you think to that?
I mean, if you just look at our portfolio, I don't think that the winner is taking all. We can see clear growth rates also on regional newspaper. So our portfolio is quite broad. We have national, international, and regional ones. And it's not that way that only the national ones or the international ones showing great growth figures. It's also, and I think Caspar can tell something about that as well. I think also the regional ones have interesting growth rates because they have something to tell on a regional level. Yeah? So that's a USP, which the bigger ones, the national ones can't tell and do not want to tell.
Caspar, would you agree with that? Welcome to the program, by the way. Winner takes all.
Welcome to the FIPP community. Hello from Berlin. It's interesting that you raised this question. I think it's the fundamental question for the paid content market during the next years. We will see. We see in the US that it tends to be a winner takes it all market. We see in other areas like Scandinavia or Germany that the market is a little bit more balanced and that more publishers profit from it. Hard to say now. Let's see.
I read somewhere recently that, for example, the New York Times has more subscribers in Dallas than the Dallas paper has, and so on and so forth. And there's a danger we may be heading down that route. We'll explore that again, I think, a little bit later on. But let's first of all ask you to tell us a little bit about Tagesspiegel. We've got a big audience from across the world here. They may not all be familiar with your paper. So just give us a little bit of an overview about who you guys are.
Yeah, sure. Tagesspiegel is the #1 newspaper in Berlin. We were founded in 1945. We obviously have a print newspaper. We have a very successful replica e-paper. We are a newsletter company. We have newsletters for every district in Berlin. We have a daily newsletter, which is read by more than 110,000 people in Berlin, which has a free and a paid version. So we were one of the publishers who tried to put a newsletter paid, and it really worked well. We have specialized B2B newsletters for politicians and top managers, and we recently introduced a freemium model on our website. So it's a huge portfolio and very interesting to work for Tagesspiegel.
So you mentioned it there, you've just put in a paywall for the 1st of July, so you're in the early kind of stages of that. You mentioned it was a freemium model. Just tell us a bit about what that model is and why you decided to go down that route.
It really is a pure and simple freemium model. We call it Tagesspiegel Plus. Freemium models are the most successful models in the German market, and they're also the most common models. We don't think that users want to learn a new model with every publisher. So this is a very good reason to go for freemium. It also enables the editors to look very much on the conversion. They see what are the articles that convert, what are the articles that retain. our customers. And for all these reasons, we opted for the freemium model for the start.
And probably a little bit too early to talk about figures for signups yet, but in general terms, are you happy with the progress you've made so far?
Absolutely. We are far above our expectations. Obviously, in the first weeks, it's your loyal user base that converts from the website, from the apps. And as I said, we have plenty of newsletters. We have many people who come from the newsletters and subscribe to subscription.
And what about the impact on the business more broadly? Has this led you to kind of change the way you work? What's been the impact there?
If you look into our editorial room, this had a huge impact. So we built a very nice live dashboard. They can see every second which article is converting, and they can adapt the content strategy accordingly. But they also see what are the articles that subscribers are reading, and it's fascinating to see that this is very different. So there are really conversion articles and there are retention articles. It's amazing to drill down in this area, and so it really had a big impact on the way we are working.
So you're almost following the same model as the Washington Post, where you've got that healthy, dynamic relationship with the newsroom, and they are understanding the value of the data that's being produced and using it to feed back to you in terms of what they want from the paywall?
I would say it's the only way to go.
You'd be surprised how many don't do that.
It's the only way to go. You mentioned earlier what are the success factors for a good paid content model. It definitely is a great team, and a great team consists of editorial, product, IT, and marketing people working on this together.
Did you face any resistance from the editorial people when the idea was first proposed?
No.
Everybody kind of gets it now?
Absolutely. I mean, it's 2020. I think we all see that if we want to produce great products and great subscriptions, we all need to work together on this.
We have a question from Richard Fairburn. Thank you, Richard. I'll come to your question in a moment. You chose CeleraOne as your partner for this project. This is they're obviously our partners, so we know how lovely they are, but this is maybe your chance to tell everybody why you chose them and how easy it was to implement their solution.
Little disclaimer, I worked for CeleraOne before, so I might be biased.
I didn't like to mention that, but you know.
I'm very open about this. On the other side, I know the technology very well, so there are good reasons we choose CeleraOne. CeleraOne is really about flexibility. It gives you the whole flexibility to adapt your model as you wish, also in the long term. And CeleraOne really understands well the infrastructure and the ecosystem. They know CMS, they know ad servers, they know ERP systems, and a paid content technology needs to connect with all these components. So it's crucially important that that CeleraOne knows all these components very well.
So you're very happy so far, and you would thoroughly recommend them to all of our other viewers today?
I would quote our tech team, they are very happy.
Good, fantastic. That's what we like to hear. So we mentioned earlier in the presentation, very, very briefly, 6 things that you need to successfully implement a paywall. What advice would you give, having been there at the coalface of implementing one, to any publisher that is thinking of putting in place a digital subscription strategy?
I mean, you mentioned most of the ingredients. It is a cocktail. You need a lot of ingredients. I think one point I would add to your list is you need instruments to engage your audience and to retain your audience. These are newsletters for us. We really try to convert people who are just coming to our site maybe 1-2 times a month into newsletter subscribers. And once we have the sign up for a newsletter subscription, it's much easier to convert them into a subscription later. And then, of course, also the retention game. Acquisition is easy, retention is tough. So you really need to think about how can we retain the people we win. Also here we work a lot with newsletters to show our audience which great content we have and to show them that they can read the latest news about their fields of interest.
Fantastic. We've got a question here from Richard that I think both of you might be in a good place to answer from different points of view. So I'm going to ask York. I'm going to ask you first on this one with the broad view that you have across the industry. He's asking about the impact of marketing strategies on the acquisition and retention of subscribers. And I'm going to kind of he's got a very long question, which Richard, I can't answer all of now, but I'll summarize it down to, do you have a particular insight into the most effective way to acquire subscribers? York, is that something you've come across in your experience with other publishers, the most effective way to acquire a new subscriber?
The most effective way, it's still difficult to answer it in one phrase. I think Caspar mentioned something. You have to understand your audience, and by that it is different from audience to audience, from regional to magazine to global to national. So it is difficult to say the most interesting one. So therefore, I think it is very important to understand your audience. For that, you need a software which can help you on that. And based on what you learn there, and Caspar mentioned something like which articles are converting, which articles are keeping the readers, based on these learnings, you have to target your audience. And I think this is which is important. And so therefore, we focused in CeleraOne not only to be a good paywall. There are good paywalls out there. I think the interesting for us was to focus on how to develop the audience in a mindset like a marketing funnel, like an e-commerce. How to funnel the people through your websites, how to understand them, how to target them, and then how to convert them, and then of course how to upsell them, how to retain them. Caspar mentioned that. I think that is what you need to understand, and that is audience by audience, I would say, different.
Caspar, your perspective, you talked about acquisition articles, so content is clearly one aspect of that. What are the other kind of marketing strategies that are there?
Well, the most effective channel is definitely the content. People come to us because they want to read content, and if we find the right content, they will convert. Next to that, we use the whole portfolio of marketing channels. Of course, we use email marketing, we use social media marketing, we use on-site. We work a lot with surveys. We ask our readers, and after the survey, we will offer them a little trial. We work with performance marketing. You basically need the whole portfolio in your marketing team. But when you ask me what is the most effective channel, it definitely is the content.
And maybe related to this, a question we've had from Abhishek again, who's asking, do publishers, so maybe you, Caspar, do you feel concerned that when you implement a paywall, you're cannibalizing your print subscription model? I think I know what you're going to say. Go on.
No. We see very little cannibalization. Actually, we don't see any cannibalization. And why would we? Because the website was free before. So actually, if a print subscriber wanted to read online, he was able to do this all the time. Now, actually, the feedback from print subscribers, we get two remarks from print subscribers. The first thing is, well done, great job. We appreciate that now online readers have to pay as well. And the second one is, please give us free access, because we are already paying for the print newspaper. We want to have access to this as well. But we don't see any movement from print subscriptions into the digital one.
That's a good perspective. Sorry, go on, go for it.
Yeah, just to add on that, because I had a very interesting discussion with a friend of mine in London once, and he said, we talk always about in this industry of how can we convert print subscribers to digital. And he said, why should we do that? Yeah, I mean, there are people who are print subscribers and they probably will ever stay print subscribers. It is more interesting because the market is still so big out there that how can we actually convert non-digital subscribers to digital subscribers. So it is better not to worry about the whole time about, oh, I cannibalize my print subscription. It's more about how can I get new readership into my portfolio and focus on that. So I think that is very important. The strategy has to be how can I convert non-digital subscribers or readers of my newspaper at all to my offering.
Two excellent points there. And Abhishek, I hope that answers your question. Maybe you should be thinking about this the other way around. You should be thinking about it from the point of view of you're annoying your print subscribers by not charging for digital because they're paying and everybody else isn't. So that could be another way to think about it. Let's open this up for a bit more of a general discussion about the market. And York, let's stick with you. Is there a danger that specifically for digital news subscriptions that we're reaching a saturation point? What's your feeling on that?
I think I would answer a little bit like Caspar did before. Currently, I do not see a true saturation on that. So many newspapers have just started or are going to start, or it's not that everybody already has a paywall or asking for paying the content. So I don't see there is a saturation right now. Of course, we have to monitor that closely and see what is changing in the next months and probably one or 2 years. I think the most important is, and this adds a little bit to the ingredients we had before, it's everybody has to find a proper niche and offer a proper USP. If you're just trying to put print and digital and not doing a true digital offer, then it might be difficult. So it's important to improve your digital product. And that is content, and content in digital can be far more engaging than in print because it's digital, of course. And based on that, I don't think we have reached a saturation. I think many of the digital products I see out there can still be improved, and by that generate new readership.
Caspar, would you agree with that? And let's also then think about it in the context of all the other things that a consumer is now paying for on a monthly basis. I mean, I pay for, maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but I pay for Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon, Dropbox, a news subscription, Spotify, Microsoft Office, and I'm probably sure there's a few I've missed on there. Is there an upper limit, Caspar, on that for the number of subscriptions that somebody's prepared to pay in general?
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, I've been working in paid content for 10 years. In the first 5 years, everybody said paid content will never work. In the last 5 years, everybody said paid content is saturated. So I think the last months showed that that there's clearly still a lot of potential if we explain to the people why it is worthwhile to subscribe, if we make great content and great products. Indeed, the interesting question will be, we talked about this at the beginning, will users be willing to pay for more than one subscription? Is it becoming a winner-takes-it-all market or not? Is everybody going for the New York Times, or are people in Berlin subscribing to New York Times and Tagesspiegel because they want to have some local content? We will see this in the forthcoming months. I'm less afraid about what you mentioned, that there are too many other subscriptions in other fields. I think people were always used to pay for music. They bought vinyl records or CDs, and they were used to pay for TV and for shopping and for software. So why should a Dropbox subscription cannibalize a new subscription? I don't think that there's a risk, but I see kind of a prisoner's dilemma all these subscription services are in. I think you really have to be fair, you really have to be transparent about the costs, you really have to give people the option to cancel, because if somebody in this whole subscription area is a little bit dodgy, people might decrease their willingness to subscribe to other services. So probably there's a dynamic between these different markets. But I can clearly see people subscribing to Spotify, to Amazon, and to a news provider. Why shouldn't they?
A question related to that came up. It comes up every single. It actually hasn't come up today, which is the first time, but in every other time when we run these sessions, it comes up. Why do publishers charge differently from Netflix and Spotify? Netflix charges $9.99 a month. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are. If you want access, it's $9.99 a month. Very easy. With the Washington Post, I could pay anything from 99 cents to $99, depending on what the technology has decided I like. So why do we have a different approach to pricing from the big tech businesses that, from the numbers, seem to be doing much better at it than we are? Caspar, what do you think?
Well, Tagesspiegel Plus costs €9.99. So
you're fixed.
You are very welcome to subscribe. Spotify and Apple Music, they have global markets, and they can scale the services for a global audience. So when you look at national publishers or local publishers, of course, they cannot scale to such an audience. They probably need to have higher prices to maintain their business. The thing is that the user still always will compare with Spotify, Netflix, of course. These prices are in the minds, and this is the challenge for publishing companies at the moment. It even becomes a little bit trickier when English-speaking publishers are also competing in other markets. Very low prices, which is fair enough, but the New York Times in Germany will probably cost you only €2 or €4 for the first months. So yeah, there's still a lot price discussion. It's a fruitful discussion. We also opted for this Spotify price point because we think that this is the common price point now.
That makes sense. It'd be interesting to see what results you get. But it sounds like you've got very good results from it, so it could be a pioneering move for the industry. York, any perspective on pricing that you want to add?
No, not really. I think Caspar made the point. I would have made the same. It's not a scaling business. It's Netflix reaches global reach and Apple and all that. So it is truly more a national or regional business, and by that it's a clear point there, that many discuss about the pricing and test pricing. We see that quite some customer of us trying to test different price levels, in a way saying first 3 months it's cheaper than the next 3 months, and then it gets more expensive for the rest of the year. So trying different price points, also when the paywall pops up and offering different price points, they testing a little bit. So I think they're still looking and searching for the right price points, and sometimes it goes a little bit towards dynamic pricing, even like in the airline industry or whatever. So it's still very interesting. It's still very interesting where the market is heading towards to.
It's clearly an evolving space, isn't it? I'm going to ask you in a minute for my closing question to think about the key challenges for paid content this year next. But before I do that, I have another question here, and York, maybe you can give us a perspective on this. From Abhishek, who's asking about the digital realm, and we mentioned it just now, the audience is global. So what percentage of digital subscriptions are international, and what percentage of traffic is international? Maybe we can't do traffic, but digital subscriptions, what do you see as the balance, both of you in your businesses, between national and international traffic for paid content?
Difficult to say, to be honest. I never looked that deep into our customers' database and subscriber base. So it's just more a gut feel, I would say. There are a couple of newspapers which we have in the portfolio which offer their newspapers internationally, and they, of course, why are they doing that? Because they hope for subscribers in other countries. But most of the clients we do have are German-centric, or Switzerland, Austrian, and German-centric, and the market is probably the German-speaking part of Europe, but it's a German newspaper and they can't offer that one in the UK. So
yeah.
So it's difficult to say that for me. I don't know if Caspar has a different experience there, but difficult to say, to be honest.
Caspar, any insight on that from the numbers you've managed to get so far?
I think it's the English newspapers that are really acquiring subscribers internationally. New York Times is very successful. Guardian has international readership, of course. I think you should look at their numbers. I remember that it was a relevant number for the New York Times. I don't have it at the top of my head. For other publishers in Germany, France, Scandinavia, it's very hard to gain subscribers internationally.
Yeah, it depends enormously on language, doesn't it? And from what we've seen, I think the New York Times and the Washington Post do have significant numbers outside the US, but and the Guardian maybe has quite a few, but I think they're pretty much the only ones that have a large enough number. A couple of other questions from the audience. Marcus Schobel is asking, what do you panelists think about vertical bundling? For example, a sports bundle. Is unbundling a promising strategy for regional publishers? Who wants to take that one?
I think we shouldn't exclude any option. I think we should look at any option. We are right at the start. My core belief is at the start you need to be very simple and to get started and to test your product proposal and then experiment from that. So verticals are an interesting area. At the moment, we are very happy with one clear product which includes everything. Makes it also very simple for us and the user to see what is part of the subscription, so we don't get too complex. But who knows? Maybe in 1 or 2 years we will look into that.
York, bundling. What do you think? Is that an option?
I would answer it like Caspar did. Probably I need to take first the question and then Caspar. So it's not always that I say that what Caspar is saying.
Yeah. The next one first.
No, I think I would make it the same point. Yeah, try out what can be of success. Monitor your audience, as I said in the beginning, and see what they like and what they don't like, what they are willing to pay for, and what they don't want to pay for. I think I worked quite some time in the magazine industry, and they are a huge magazine publisher. They have in the vertical, they have a couple of magazines which target the same idea of the vertical, while not bundling that and making it more simple to read sports across all their brands instead of trying to market all their sports brand bit by bit. So it could absolutely make sense. We have a customer in Switzerland who market the newspaper and readers of the newspaper in a certain area of politics and economy towards a magazine which they have in the portfolio, which fits perfectly to this segment. So if you can upsell towards a magazine, why not trying? Yeah? It can work, and if it doesn't work and the software is able to still to put the product in place, you can test that, and if it doesn't work, then yeah, just get rid of it again, of the product.
Caspar has his hand up.
James, I found the number of international subscribers to the New York Times.
It is.
In February, they had 500,000 subscribers. They say to our core digital news offerings.
Yep.
I guess that's the number without crosswords and cooking.
Yep.
500,000.
That's pretty good. That's more than 10% of the total.
Great. Yeah.
That's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you consider that the New York Times home market is New York, then if you count everything outside New York, it's probably much larger than that. Okay, so as promised, York, you can take this question first from Alfredo. Do you expect any rebound of printed subscriptions and printed circulation when we return to a normal situation after COVID-19? Or would it continue, or will this trend of skyrocketing digital subscriptions continue? I would say, Alfredo, that from what we've seen, printed subscriptions are actually going up at the moment. It's printed newsstand circulation that's going down. So, York, what do you think of that? Are we going to see, is this a kind of new permanent trend of digital subscriptions growth?
I would say yes, because I think you reached an audience which you haven't had before. So I don't think that the audience and the increase in numbers we see here are only switchers from print to digital. I think the industry reached a new audience which haven't subscribed or read the content before. So I think we will still see growth rates in that. Concerning the print, I think there's something Caspar could answer to. What happening to print afterwards, I can't say, but I still think that the growth rates in digital probably not as high as in the last months, because it was a very intense COVID-driven bounce. But I still think that we will see good growth rates in the next month.
Caspar, expecting a print rebound after COVID finishes or not?
We actually saw that our print subscriptions are slowly going down, like for most other publishers. But we saw that a deceleration during the last months, also maybe because the people stayed more at home, had more time. I don't expect this trend but I don't expect the trend to change, that print is slowly going down. We still make a lot of money with print and we love print, but this is just the trend. We see growth in digital, in e-paper, so the replica editions, and really in the plus model that we have on our website. And I expect this growth to continue. I think we've seen maybe 2 external shocks in the last 5 years in the paid content market. The first external shock was only in the US. It was the election of Donald Trump. And there was a bump in subscriptions, but it continued to grow after the even 1 or 2 years later. And maybe the second external shock now is COVID. I don't want to sound too cynical, but just we see that these external factors influence the behavior of people subscribing. This is an international phenomenon. I expect that the growth will continue.
So let me then close. We're running out of time. Let me close with the kind of question that I teed up earlier, starting with you, York. What do you think are the key challenges for paid content this year and next?
Key challenge for this year and next? I think the key challenge is still that you have to convince readers that content has a value and that you need to pay for content. So it's not that clear as in Spotify that you need to pay for video on demand. It's still sometimes it feels like people are questioning that good content has to be paid for. So convincing people that content absolutely has a value and therefore you need to pay for it, and that you can only do, and this is a challenge on the one side, you need to put in place a true digital and unique offer. So think about that. What is the true and unique offer you can place at the market? And then, of course, technically learn from your readers and what they are interested in and what they are willing to pay for, and by that develop your audience. Yeah? So I think that is a very important part.
Caspar, key challenges this year and next?
First thing is retention. We talked about this. How do I retain users? Next to all the things we've discussed, I think that the brand is a very important factor in this. Publishers need to create brands that people really like to subscribe to. They feel proud to be a subscriber of that brand. And second challenge is, we talked about this several times, is is the paid content market a winner-takes-it-all market, or will it be more balanced? And this will be extremely interesting to see.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your insights. Fantastic. We've run out of time. We've run out of audience questions as well. We're almost at 3 o'clock here in the UK, 4 o'clock there in Germany. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also to everybody in our audience for joining us. I'll just put up again the things that we want you to do now. Thank you very much for watching. Now I want you to go and do this. Please go to the FIPP Congress website and sign up for the Congress, where you'll be able to hear the next edition of these sessions covering the next edition of the report, which will be out in a few weeks' time. You can download the full report. The links are there in the chat. Please go in and do that. You can write to me. I'm james@fipp.com. Ask me more about FIPP. Ask me about how we can help your business. Some of you have done that already in the chat. Thank you very much for that. Follow us on Twitter. We're at FIPPWorld, at FIPPCEO. That's the best way to learn when new stuff comes out and when new reports are there for you to download. And of course, watch your inbox for the follow-up email tomorrow. It will have a link to the slides. It will have a link to the forthcoming activities around this subject that you can sign up for. In the meantime, though, we thank you very much for joining. We hope you have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you and goodbye.